Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Omar. I own a flight school here in Orange County, California. Today I wanted to talk about Checkride failures and the impact they have on your career. Many of you know that there's a big rush for flight training right now. A lot of you younger guys are going through these accelerated programs. We have one here at OC Flight Lessons at my school. And I wanted to discuss how important it is today that you really try your hardest to pass these check rides, because they have a big impact on your career, guys. When I was at the airlines, when I interviewed an airline, the number one question asked to me is, how many check rides have you failed? It was a big question. When I interview instructors at my school, let's say if they don't come from my school and I interview them, one of the first questions I ask is, how many check rides have you failed? And I'm gonna go into detail about why we ask that question, what it tells us, and the impact it can have on your career from every stage of it, from trying to get a job as a flight instructor, to trying to get on with a regional airline, to going on with a career with, say, United or Delta. So first off, your Checkride, your records, called your prior records, these are your FAA records, they follow you for life. They are permanent records kept with the FAA at the Oklahoma City office at their headquarters. Those records are kept forever. I started back in the late 90s, I started doing my private Checkride and started going through the whole process. Literally every single Checkride or 8710 form or my medical, everything is kept on file with the FAA. This is an act of Congress. It's required because it's important to know training records and a history of pilots because of the sensitivity of the job. They want to make sure that a pilot, for example, isn't fired at an airline for a really bad failure for something that, let's say they failed in training because they were incompetent, or they kept crashing a simulator because they don't know how to fly an airplane, or they're bad at making decisions, and whatever the reason, they got fired, they got let go. These are all valid reasons. You're flying the general public. People don't want bad pilots in the cockpit, so we have to have a system to keep track of who these guys are, and the FAA keeps track of that. That way, that prevents the pilot from applying to a different airline and, say, hiding those things from people. That's how it used to be. You used to be able to hop from one airline to another and hide those failures until the FAA said, we got to have a centralized database to keep track of all this stuff, and those are called your prior records. So let's start with the flight instructor level. If you're going through your ratings and you're getting ready for a check ride, you're not studying hard enough, you're not taking it seriously enough, and you get a failure, one failure is not the end of the world. If you get a failure on your private, or you fail on your instrument, or any of these ratings, one failure, not the end of the world. Nobody's perfect. I had a failure on my instrument check ride, took off out of Orange County, went to do a hold at Seal Beach, had a brain fart, turned the wrong direction, failure. Did a retake, passed, end of story. That was my one failure during all my training and all my years. When I went to job interviews, they asked me, did you fail? I said, yeah, this is what I did. I owned up to it, said, yeah, I just turned the wrong way. I had a brain fart, and I turned it into a positive. I said, I'm really glad that it happened during a training phase of my career. I mean, even though it's a check ride and it's not training, all of your ratings from 0 time to 250, all that's all considered training. You're getting your ratings, you're building your experience. So I'm glad it happened at that time and not with passengers in the back of an airplane, obviously for obvious reasons. So I was able to talk about that at my first job interview at a regional airline. Now, let's say I would have had a second Checkride failure, and I've seen that before with students coming to me, or I should say instructors coming to me trying to get a job. They say, well, I got a second Checkride failure. Now I'm interested. Now I want to know why. Okay, the first one, maybe you said, you were doing your private and you had a brain fart, or you were coming in for a short field landing and you landed 5 feet short of your mark. You did a retake, done, end of story. Okay, Was it a Checkride failure for the oral? Because I'm kind of interested in that. If you have a Checkride failure for an oral exam, that tells me you didn't prep. That tells me you didn't try hard enough. That says a lot about you. And I'm here to warn you about that, guys. That makes an impression on your career. You don't want that associated with you. And it's a big thing because when I give interviews, I evaluate that stuff. So you want to be really careful and prepared. Grab your instructor and make sure that you have someone constantly giving you feedback about the answers that you're giving instructors. So what we do with students here at our school in our accelerated program, or even not in our accelerated program, is let's say we'll say, hey, you're gonna read chapter 5 tonight of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. Tomorrow, when you come in, I want you to be able to explain out loud to me whatever I point to in chapter 5. And then the next day they'll come in, and common things that they say is, I know what to say, I just don't know how to say it. And that's where the weaknesses get exposed. And that's where I say, you're gonna fail the Checkride if you can't say it. That's not a suitable answer to tell someone on a Checkride. I know what it is, but I just can't say it. End of Checkride, you fail. You need to know that before you do a Checkride. You need to know it well in advance. You should know these things throughout your training by the time you solo. You cannot leave that for the last minute. You're not trying to learn how to be, this isn't a job you could take lightly. You're training how to be a commercial pilot or just any pilot in general. There's a lot of consequences at play with life and death. So you should really take this seriously. You're spending a lot of money for your training. You should sit down and study, and not just study and read it, but you need to be able to explain it back. And a good instructor is going to poke you in 10 different directions. I always tell my students, you're paying me to train you, but you're also paying me to prepare you before you walk into battle. When if you have a boxer, let's say Mike Tyson, if Mike Tyson was training for a fight, imagine if his trainer just kind of sat there and didn't punch him and didn't hit him and didn't train him properly. He'd go into a fight and fail. He'd get knocked out in the first few seconds. You know, if you want to go into a fight and be well prepared, you want your instructor hitting you in 10 different directions, asking you, exposing your weaknesses, making sure you understand all these concepts, because if you don't know them, if you can't explain them during a practice session, what makes you think you're going to be able to explain it during a Checkride when the heat is on? This is how I learned to fly 20 years ago. I squeezed all this into this. Flight Academy Online makes it easy to understand complicated concepts. From our in-depth explanations to our state-of-the-art 3D graphics, Flight Academy Online is easy to understand from all your devices at any time, from anywhere. Having been a flight instructor for the past 20 years, Flight Academy Online revolutionizes the learning process. Simplify your training and sign up today. The hardest instructor I ever had in training was at a regional airline. Everybody in my training class was begging not to get this guy. I was happy when I got him for a couple reasons. Number one, it was a training event. There was no fault for not knowing stuff. There was no failure. You're not going to lose your job. It was training. So I knew that I would learn a lot without penalty, and that made me feel comfortable. And I knew he was a hard instructor, so I knew I was really getting my money's worth, even though I wasn't paying for training, the airline was. I knew it was really valuable, and he wouldn't go easy on me, and he'd go very hard on me. And I knew that was gonna carve me into the most leanest, most fit version of my pilot self I could be. Whereas most people, they were like, that guy scares me. I'm like, no. If you do your work, if you try hard, if you study, you put in the work and you memorize and you learn and you say it back to him, you're gonna earn his respect. And I felt like that's what I did during training, and I made a great name for myself during training. That's what you want. You want a good name for yourself as you go through your career. Your reputation matters. This is a small community, guys. This isn't the general public. Flying is a very small community. It's still like that to this day, and it will be for a long time. The other thing was, I knew that if the company had a policy, if the instructor did your training, they were prohibited from doing your check ride, because it's no secret people develop relationships and become friends. The airline didn't want somebody becoming friends with an instructor and then going easy on them during the check ride. They didn't want that happening. So I knew that if I had a hard instructor for training and he was the hardest one, then the check ride would be easy for me, because the examiners, the other guys were a little bit less stringent. They were a little bit less intense. So then the check ride would feel like kind of a practice session, and then the practice sessions would be hard, intense workouts. So I kind of was happy about it. I was thinking long-term about it. I was like, no, this is actually a good thing. You need to make flight training like that. You need to get an instructor who's hard. Don't get the easy ones. The easy ones aren't doing you any favors. They're making it actually worse for you by not testing you. I have meetings at my school constantly every week with my instructors, and I'm like, you're not doing these guys favors by being their friends and just making things easy for them. With the exception, I'm telling them, you know, you don't have to be mean to them, but the key is you have to hold them accountable. If your instructor is not holding you accountable, say something. Tell him, say, or her, say, I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to ask me questions that are going to come up on a check ride, because I don't want to fail this check ride. If you feel like maybe there's holes or stuff that's missing there and you're not getting adequate training, then do something about it. Find a different instructor. Find someone online to ask you questions. Find an instructor online from another area to ask you questions. You have an infinite amount of opportunities and possibilities in today's age with the internet. So that's important, guys. Put in the effort for training. Don't fail these check rides, because you could get away with 1 failure, 2 failures, you better be explaining stuff. Let's talk about 3 failures. If I see 3 failures on an interview, I'm not hiring that instructor, guys. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. I have people to think about at the school. Is there a safety risk? Is this person lazy? Are they complacent? Are they don't want to put in the work? What? Now there's a trend of these failures. What is going on? And I don't have infinite amount of time to evaluate this person. I know them for a few minutes on an interview. If they're in my program, I tell them ahead of time. They ask, am I guaranteed a job? I say, no, you're not. And they say, why? I said, because how are you going to do in training? Are you going to study? Are you going to be complacent? Are you going to show up late? Are you going to not show up at all? Are you going to be lazy? How are you going to perform? Because how you perform will determine if I hire you on as an instructor. I don't want bad instructors on my team. If I had bad instructors on my team, then people wouldn't sign up at my school. It would reflect on it. And so I tell them that in the beginning and go, fair enough. Even though I have that discussion with them, I still have students that come through the program. They lack the discipline, they're a little lazy, or just to be fair, they never learned good study habits. And that's what we're here for, is teach them good study habits. That's what we try to do here. So it's really their option to decide if they want to build on those skills and learn how to study, or it's their decision if they want to be complacent and not study and just be lazy. You're not going to pass the check ride. And you're affecting your whole career, guys. The 3rd check ride failure, I can tell you this, it's going to follow you in your career. If you go try to apply to a regional airline, you won't get your 1st pick. You might not get your 2nd pick. You might not get your 3rd pick. They're in a huge shortage of pilots, but they're not going to hire you if you're showing that kind of a history. They're not. There's a red line in the sand, and they're not going to cross it. So just be careful. Going into a 3rd failure, you're stepping into some dangerous territory, and it will not go away for the rest of your career. That's a big statement. There are ways to make up for it. If you have a 3rd failure and you still somehow get hired at a regional airline, which is possible, if you're a good interviewer and you can talk your way through it, the way that you make up for it is you have a perfect record going through the regional airline. And when you apply for a major airline, let's say you apply at United or Delta, having 3 check ride failures, that's going to be a big no-no for them. But If you show them, hey, look, I went through regional airlines, I did Checkride after Checkride, never had problems, never had failures. And you say, in the beginning, I was younger, didn't have the study habits, wasn't taking things seriously, or I had a lot on my plate. I was working full time, paying bills at home, whatever. If you have a good reason behind it and it's a believable story, then you can prove that you improved and you didn't have any problems when those reasons went away. You have a chance. There's a possibility. Everybody can redeem themselves. But why make it harder on yourself when you don't have to? If you're in the beginning of your training, put the effort in now so you don't have these problems. I've got story after story of people who have multiple failures that I've known about that try to get on with airlines. They can't. They don't even get calls for interviews because they've got, I have somebody I know that's got 6 Checkride failures. He came from another school and asked for a job as an instructor. I said, I'm sorry, dude, you have 6 Checkride failures. I can't. If I were to hire you and you were to go out and accidentally, crash an airplane or do something, I'm going to be held accountable. They're like, why did you hire this person that had 6 Checkride failures? It was obvious that this person had issues in training. That falls on my shoulders, and I can't take that liability. And I'm just a flight school. Imagine if you're a major airline, they're not going to take that liability. So super, super, super important. Don't wait to the last minute. Don't cram. Prepare for your Checkride well in advance and get someone to really push you hard to do well in training. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Please click the like button if you liked the video. It really helps the channel out. Subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you guys in the comments.